Hello, I'm Kate Horner and this is my exhibition, One Shell. It's a different exhibition. It feels almost unfinished, but it's all about the knowledge I've acquired studying one shell. And this came out of us filming our design courses, which I've been asked to do over and over again by makers who have incredible making skills but didn't have the design knowledge. And they could see that through design they could become more themselves. So we filmed colour, shape, line, texture, form. We filmed what I deliver at Arty Bird to my students to make it accessible to everyone. We didn't set out for it to be about one shell. It was just convenient because I'd been studying it and my sketchbook started before we started to film. It was convenient because I'd already knew about the colours in it and things that were in it, so I didn't have to make it up in front of the camera, and it made filming easier. But then we got drawn into it, we got invested in it, and it became the star of every course. So it's really, really exciting, and we're also here with the wonderful film crew that filmed the courses. And so they've seen all of this in front of the camera being made. And it was actually their idea to say, wouldn't it be great to see all of this together in a space? And I put that to Joe here at Farfield Mill. And Joe and Claire very kindly, very generously said, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's put this up. And this is about acquiring knowledge. It's about me as an educator, not as an artist. It's about how I inspire you to be artists. And it's here just amazing wealth of knowledge that I've acquired. And some of it I've taken through into finished pieces. Certainly I've taken pieces through into what we call sampling for design, where we've started to explore in textiles what's on paper. And I say we, because some of my students have jumped in and they've helped me, and they have taken on some of my artwork and been inspired by it. And it's going to be really interesting for you to see what they've done, and also for me to talk a little bit about what they gained from working from my work rather than their own. So this is a very different sort of an exhibition, and I really hope you enjoy it. I really hope that you are inspired by it to maybe look at your own work in slightly different ways. And if you really, really want to jump on board, these courses are online. And you can buy into them and study them in your own time. But also, if you want to study as a group, then we have the Design Plus, where we put groups of people together and you work through the courses together, but we also meet together to staff, really inspiring teachers, and the group of you, going through your work, reviewing your work, but also giving you hints as to how that could be taken into your own craft area. So that's really exciting. So we have all sorts of ways that you could get involved with it, and this is really just the starting point. Shall we go and take a look? So I'm bringing you to the first wall, and it's not really where we started with the filming, but it's where my most dominant design feature comes from. And we have colour, shape, line, texture and form, and we all have things that we naturally gravitate to and things that we kind of don't think about, that aren't considered. And for me, line is my dominant design area. And everything for me comes back to drawing. I'm always putting drawing and line into action. So I've actually started this wall with line, and then I'm moving it through to colour and shape, which is where we started with the courses. So I want to tell you a little bit more about those in detail. So let's have a look at some of the line pieces. As you can see, lots of drawing, lots of different ways of making lines. And lines can be three-dimensional. They can be folded and manipulated as well as drawn. I like using wet media and dry media. Some of these have been done blindfolded and from touch, which is really interesting to bring other senses in. Some are longer studies. And then we've got here haberdashery as line. And that can be really quite challenging to think about the quality of the line over colour. Colour tends to shout at us and be dominant. So to pick items that are the wrong colour, but the right line quality can be quite challenging, but really, really interesting. And then you can put that underneath your paper and do rubbings with wax and then draw over the top. And it gives you rhythms going on underneath before you've even started. And that can be interesting just to mess with the paper a little bit. And I love using rubbings. I'll have all sorts of things that I can play with just to find rhythms that I can tear or cut up and collage with. Here I'm starting to introduce some colour. Colour and line is quite interesting. Lots of people who do concentrate on line tend to work tonally because you're looking at the colour, looking at the value, the tonal value rather than the colour. So working in colour can be really interesting and line, and I really love working with coloured pencil and the marks that that will make, and then bringing in some lovely inks that can bleach as well, and letting the colours merge into one another. So there's all sorts of lines, qualities going on, and techniques, and I hope that there's something there that you sort of think, want to give that a go. So these two boards show where it began. The first year we filmed colour, and we were actually just coming out of lockdown, and we were masked up, and we were just able to do it, and it was really challenging and exciting to make a start with this course. And so yes, there's loads and loads of paint charts and understanding how colour works, and that's about half the course. And yeah, okay, it can feel but everybody who paints the paint charts, and I've done it with hundreds of students, they end up carrying those paint charts with them everywhere and matching colours and mixing colours and understanding colours. In fact, one of my Canadian students said, "I now see colour." It was absolutely amazing to hear her say that. So once the paint charts are done and we start to observe an object, we start to match and mix those colours and paint up papers to work with. And the really interesting thing to do is to actually start using them in proportion, in the proportion that we see the colours, because that is how we've selected the object. Then we can step outside of that and start to work with the colours out of proportion, just really, really simply to understand how we will use those colours. So for instance here, every time I use this dark colour, I always covered it in loads and loads of shapes. I obviously don't like a lot of dark in the background, whereas this blue always ended up being open and spacious. Somebody else using these colours might do it in a completely different way, because we all see it differently. That is what I learned from the way I see colour and wanted to use them. And so we went on to study them in shape and starting to play with the simple collages we've created, and starting to paint on photocopies of some of the collages, very quickly mark making, looking at some of the rhythms and the colour palette, and then very slowly stitching So the photocopy's been scrunched up, it's been bonded to fabric so that it's like a fabric, and I've been able to stitch. That slowed me down. A lot of what I do is very quick. It's very gestural. It's how I am. So to slow down and be considered is something that can be really important to me, to be mindful, and again, to acquire that knowledge and understanding of what I'm taking from the shell. We're back to line, my favourite, and we've got 4 boards here that took 20 minutes because it's 20 drawings in 20 minutes, 1 minute a drawing. And that can sound crazy, but once you get absorbed in it, you actually start to work very quickly and you start to see things and edit out information and put down the information that's important to you. It's a great process. It's a process you can use at the beginning when you're just starting to look so that you can discover things about it and look deeper and deeper and deeper. It's something you can do partway through, and you can do it from your object, but you can also do it from your work. So if you're making a textile piece and you're getting a little bit stuck in it, do 20 drawings in 20 minutes from it. and it can unstick you, and it can help you to see the things that are important to you about what you're making. You can also do it at the end. So when we complete a piece, often it's finished, it's over, full stop, walk away. How often do we look at the work of other people and start to draw from that to understand how they've used colour, how they've used line? Do it from your own work and find out why it worked. And that can be a springboard to the next piece, or it can help you with the analysis of the piece you've just created. It's all about acquiring knowledge. So 20 drawings in 20 minutes. Set your phone clock, let it bing, and just keep working to it. And work in media of your choice. I like working with quite soft media because I'm quite gestural, but working quite fine you can. Just work smaller. I cut up my paper before I start. They're all different proportions so that I can go in. And some of them are messy bits of paper where I've been painting backgrounds and I've got splash marks on the back paper, and I cut that up. So I've got little bits of things in the paper before I even start. And that can be fun as well. Gives you surprises. So as a surprise, the Fellowship alumni decided they wanted to be part of the exhibition. And looking at all the work, they were really inspired by the 20 drawings in 20 minutes. So they took a few of them each and did 20 textiles in 20 days. We decided a day in textiles is the equivalent of a minute drawing. So they found that challenging, because they work small and they had to work in a day. Usually they work big and they work for months on a piece. So they created all sorts of things, playing around with techniques that we'd been looking at and discussing. They played with colour relationships. What they found interesting was to actually look at some of the marks I'd made and then trying to replicate that in their own work, because they're used to their own drawing style and the marks that they make. With drawing for me is as individual as a diary. It's as personal and private as a diary. You are what we are. You know, we make visible something invisible that is within us. And the sooner you can get comfortable with the marks you make, the sooner you'll be happier drawing. And so they found it really alien to work from my marks rather than their own. And they had to develop ways of working with the fibres that were new to them. And we had a long conversation about this. But without fail, every one of them took something from this and took it into their own personal work and extended the work that they had done. We call this sampling for design, to actually explore the design in textile rather than on paper. And they're not finished pieces, they're just playing and dabbling and discovering. And from it, who knows what's going to happen? And for every one of them, something new emerged. So really enjoy playing, sometimes big, sampling for design. Comes from one of my drawings, just to work large, small, enjoy that playing with materials and discovering something new. goal of this, I've said, is discovery, it's exploration, but sometimes we want to resolve an idea and we want to take it to its conclusion rather than leaving it hanging. And I've got two pieces here where I have resolved those ideas. So this piece here is a shibori piece. It's done on a blanket, and I have drawn and observed the shell. I know the rhythms of it. I think of it almost as tensions, that you've got this tightness where the rigid lines are, and this openness, looseness, where the knuckles are. I don't know what they're called, but I call them knuckles. And so what I wanted to do within this piece was to bring in this idea of the rhythms and the looseness within the way that I tied it and dyed it. So I actually used a lot of bulldog clips to put in these rhythms. I used marbles and things and buttons to tie up to create these sunbursts, as we call them, in here. I actually layered the 3 layers of dye, retying in between, so that I started off with a very pale tint of dye. Then I built that up with a medium strength of dye, and then I finished off with these very strong, just painting it on where I just wanted these strength of mark coming through. In one sense, it was a fluke, because I had this idea that I could do this in the way that I've said. It's what I call an open-ended experiment. What happens if I do this? But having said that, there's an awful lot of experience in the background of how to use the tools for shibori, how to put the dyes on to create something like this, just in mixing the colours as well to get the palette that I wanted. And when it came out, it was, wow, I love this. This one, however, very, very different. This one came out of my sketchbook. It's one of the drawings that I made quite early on in my sketchbook, and then I observed that drawing and wanted to replicate it in embroidery, and there are hours of work in this. And this is the way I personally work, and the techniques I've developed, and in my sketchbook you can see some of the samples where I'm developing these techniques. And I work stitching before, during and after felt making. So I'm layering fabrics on fusible soluble. I then stitch into them. I then felt those. I print with natural dyes. In this case, I'd actually mordanted the materials before I started. Sometimes I mordant it before I print. Put some colour on, stitched at the half felt stage, put some more colour on, fully felted it, added more colour, and then added the final stitching with threads that I've dyed naturally. So there's a lot of hours of work here, and again, a lot of experience. So I kind of knew what I was creating, although any creation is a dance where you're responding to what you've done and moving on. But when you've acquired all the knowledge that you have, then you can start to make individual pieces that are fresh, that are new, that are inspiring. Well, we're here with the alcove wall, and it's always a pleasure to exhibit in the alcove wall. And it's kind of a mishmash of pieces that work well together, but really what we're looking at is form. And there's a great juxtaposition here of some of the line drawings that I usually make, and those ones have been very gestural, minimal. And then the drawings that I do when I'm working, looking at 3 dimensions, looking at form. And you can see the quality of the line is different, and the way in which I'm feeling the form. because you can draw them just as shapes and make them very, very flat. And when you do that, then you go into pattern repeat. But when you look at the form, then you are feeling the three-dimensional quality of it. And I was always taught, particularly working with charcoal, charcoal is a great one to start feeling form. Because if it comes out, take the pressure off. If it goes in, put the pressure on. And just by doing that, you will start to create a line that is moving in and moving out. So again, you can just discover through the pressure that you make, as though you're touching the object, you can start to draw those qualities in your work. And as you discover those, then we can move into working in a sketchbook form of form. And I was taught this by Shane Green, who was a sculptor and a colleague when I taught in school. And he showed me how to take cardboard and cut it and hinge it and push it and pull it to make new discoveries. So this is kind of a sketchbook discovering new things about the form. I'm not trying to replicate the shell. What I'm doing is looking for something new that I can use and explore. And we can take that and we can put it in front of a light and create shadows, which helps us to exaggerate the form, but also to create new things that again we can draw, that can become flat emblems within a vessel, or you can start to mould them. And here I've used wire and felt and stitch to start to discover unusual forms within it. So lots going on the wall. And this piece up here, I love this painting. My students asked me to slow down. A lot of what I do is very quick, unless I'm working with the textile. So what we opted to do was to draw or paint for a day, one thing for a day, and to look and look and look further. By the end of the day, I could still see more, but I had to teach another class the next day, and so I didn't come back to it because it was out of the moment. And you get into that flow state, and I knew if I came back to it, it would change the balance, it would become something different. I didn't want to do that. I love it. So when we're talking about form, what are we talking about? We're talking about viewpoints. We're talking about seeing something in the round, having a number of viewpoints going around it. If it's a hat seen from a balcony, you're looking down on it. A child might look up and see underneath the brim. So it's being able to see all around it. That's what form is. And when we're working with form in that way, what we're doing is we're manipulating light. We're manipulating how the light will hit the surfaces. And that's what we can take from it. So we've just seen my card sculpture, and we've seen how I manipulated the light there and then added to it with the direct light and creating shadow. Another way that we can work with form is to work with minimal viewpoints. And we call this low relief. And what we're doing is we're creating viewpoints from a fixed point. So there may be 2 or 3 different ways of looking at it, but it is fixed and it's just coming out of the surface. So it kind of is the blend between texture, which we saw at the beginning where I was using zips and rubbing blocks, and now we're linking it into form by bringing it out of the surface even more and really playing with the light and the low relief. So one of the things you can do is you can use your object as a drawing tool. So you can take some clay and you can press your object into the clay. And I'm not just using it singly, I'm actually doing repetition so that I'm actually thinking about how that might build up. And then what I can do is I can cast it in plaster and I can start to see the drawing, what the object looks like in 3 dimensions. And they're absolutely beautiful. So here you can see the marks of the shell surface, playing with the shell in different formats and turning it and discovering, pressing with different pressures, and then we can start to cast it, and it really does reveal so much about the shell that I've not seen before. I have to say, these aren't all one shell. The father of one of my students bought me a bag of shells, and I really do enjoy playing with them and just finding out more shell shapes and, you know, really finding these that can look quite ugly. You can be looking at things thinking, what's that going to be like? Then you get that, and that is my shell, okay? That is one shell. That's it, being cast and discovered. And from that, you can go on and draw, and you can start to draw all this beautiful minutiae of detail. You can draw it big and bold like you did right at the beginning, and I showed you the big charcoal ones, or you can come in and look at this surface quality and the marks in here. And they could be inspiration for stitch that's going to come out, fabric manipulation, ways of tying the shibori. That came from doing this. It's just, again, a way of acquiring knowledge that you can take into your work. I know we're not meant to have favourites, but I do. I love this collage. And I produced this on the shape course, and it's been filmed and edited, so you don't watch me making all of it, but it was made with no plan, so it's genuine, watching me create, and I made this and I absolutely adore it, and I so want to do something with it. I'm just not sure yet, but maybe now I've started to weave those little tapestry pieces, I could see this as a tapestry, and it will go on my list of tapestries to weave. I love it. So my fellowship group, who have their exhibition at the moment, Intertwined, as part of their course, they wanted to develop this collaborative work. And we kept discussing ways of doing it, and they decided that they wanted to work from a single piece, all of them responding to the same piece, for a weekend, so that they put a considered amount of time into it. So I sort of went, oh, two birds, one stone. Let's give them my favourite collage. So they saw it before they came for that weekend, so they had time to think about it, to plan, to think about colours. And then they came in and worked for 2 days, creating these wonderful responses. So we've got Rachel's panel here with a small vessel. We've got Pat's beautiful piece here with stitching. Sue's tapestry. Hilary's vessel, which just picked up on so many aspects of the shell and the collage. Taylor's response, this beautiful flat felt with stitching, and the 3 vessels, and they work collectively flat, or they can be brought to the edge and it can hang. It creates just the most incredible collection, and I love it to pieces. What I think is interesting is, it said here, this is about me as an educator, not as an artist. It's about how I enable you to become an artist. And it's been quite mesmerising to see Intertwined. And they've studied with me for 8 years. They've been through all this design process with me and become individual makers in their own right. I just feel so privileged that they did this for me, for my exhibition. And I know that you will enjoy the film of their exhibition as well.